A lot of directors name him as an influence. Tarantino, Edgar Wright, even Terrence Malick. But De Palma's a movie guy first, and over the years, he's talked about all the underrated films that inspired him. So let's get into some of his favorites. A horror movie about a dog trained to attack black people sounds insane, but White Dog somehow pulls it off. Paul Winfield plays a trainer trying to reprogram the dog while the film digs into the ugliness of racism in America. It's like Cujo meets Get Out, but way ahead of its time. De Palma was blown away by it. Dogs in movies don't normally scare me. But this dog is terrifying. I was so impressed with that dog that I used it in Body Double. The movie barely got released. Paramount freaked out, understandably, worried people would take it the wrong way, and basically buried it. It didn't get a proper home video release in North America until 2008, when Criterion finally added it to their collection. It's one of Michael Haneke's earlier movies, about this teenager who's completely numb to violence. He spends all his time alone, glued to his video equipment, watching horror movies. Then one day, he invites a girl over, and, just like that, he kills her. No emotion, no panic, just films the whole thing like it's nothing. De Palma first saw Benny's video in the 80s and got hooked on Haneke's work. I remember seeing Benny's video and becoming very interested in him. I met him at a festival, and he showed me a couple of his films. I've made sure to see all of them since. It's not as well known as Funny Games, but if you're into films that really get under your skin, this one's worth tracking down. War movies usually have some kind of heroism in them, but Flanders just shows how ugly it is. It's about a farmer who gets sent off to war, leaving behind his loved ones, and it just grinds him down. No heroism, no some big emotional payoff, just war turning people into something unrecognizable. The movie doesn't soften anything. The characters feel empty, like they're already dead inside. No one's a hero. No one walks away clean. It's just people thrown into war and coming back broken. De Palma caught Flanders at the Toronto Film Festival, and it stuck with him. I was struck by it. It gave me much food for thought. It won the Grand Prix at Cannes, but barely made a dent in the US. It played for just a week at Cinema Village in New York. De Palma has always loved Sam Fuller's movies, and The Naked Kiss is one of his favorites. He calls it his guilty pleasure. It's about Kelly, a former sex worker trying to start over in a small town, but the people there won't let her forget her past. No matter how hard she tries, she keeps getting pulled back into a mess of secrets, lies, and corruption. De Palma called The Naked Kiss a revelation, especially the key scene where Kelly's wig gets ripped off during a fight, revealing she's bald. B-movie director William Castle was known for his crazy gimmicks, and Homicidal was no different. He literally offered refunds if people were too scared to finish it. As for the movie itself, it's a Psycho knockoff, sure, but with a twist that caught De Palma completely off guard. I was totally fooled the first time I saw it. I was very shocked by that ending. There's no question it's an imitation Hitchcock, but it had a really good trick to it and was very creepy. De Palma saw Homicidal on 42nd Street, 4th row, packed theater. He said the place went crazy when the big reveal hit. Salesman is a documentary about 4 door-to-door Bible salesmen, following them from Boston to Florida as they try to make a living. These guys aren't just selling $50 billion Bibles. They're selling hope to people who probably can't afford it. And they know it. The film focuses mostly on Paul, one of the salesmen, who starts to crack under the pressure. He's worried he's lost his ability to close. And when your entire income depends on selling, that's the beginning of the end. De Palma called it a great nonfiction movie, the best weaving together of documentary footage with a dramatic fictional storyline, yet it was all real. He even compared The Salesman's story to Death of a Salesman and In Cold Blood. This one's a post-apocalyptic erotic sci-fi movie set in a world where most of humanity can't have sex anymore. The few that still can are forced to perform in front of the rest at a club called Café Flesh. Director Steven Sayadian takes that insane concept and turns it into something artsy, surreal, and completely off the wall. Some people see it as a satire of the adult film industry. Others just see it as a cult classic that doesn't fit neatly into any genre. It's too weird for exploitation fans and too raunchy for art house crowds. But if you're in the right mindset, it's something else entirely. De Palma called Sayadian's films his guilty pleasure, and you can see why. David Holzman's Diary is a fake documentary about a guy, an aspiring filmmaker who decides to film his everyday life. But the longer he records, the more things start to spiral, and the line between art and reality completely falls apart. Jim McBride shot the film on a tiny budget, and his guerrilla-style approach and basically meta-filmmaking had a huge influence on De Palma. When I first got my 8mm sound camera, I'd carry it around like David Holzman and try to film everything I did, he said. McBride would later go on to direct the American remake of Breathless with Richard Gere, but David Holzman's Diary remains his most unique film. Spielberg, Soderbergh, De Palma. They all love this one, and for good reason. Before Deliverance, John Boorman made Point Blank, a crime thriller that's weird, stylish, and way ahead of its time. Lee Marvin plays a guy who gets double-crossed, shot, and left for dead, and all he wants is his money back. That's it. That's the whole movie. He just tears through everyone in his way. Stone-faced. Unstoppable. De Palma compared him to the Terminator. Lee Marvin goes through incredible things to get his money back. Nothing will stop him. He's like the Terminator. The movie also made history. It was the first film ever shot at Alcatraz after the prison shut down in 1963. The place had been abandoned for 3 years when the crew moved in, and it wasn't exactly production ready. 2 weeks of filming on the island required a 125-person crew just to keep things running. Luchino Visconti made a lot of dark films, but The Damned might be the most disturbing. It follows the Essenbecks, a wealthy German family trying to stay in power as Hitler takes over. Some of them sell their souls to the Nazis, some try to fight back, but none of them come out clean. De Palma didn't even try to explain it. He just said, unbelievable, totally perverse people, a totally corrosive family. And yeah, that pretty much sums it up. The whole thing plays out like a slow-motion car crash. You can't look away, even when it gets ugly. Another Visconti film, but completely different. This one's about King Ludwig II of Bavaria, the guy who built all those insane castles in Germany. If you've ever seen Neuschwanstein Castle, the one that inspired Disney's Cinderella Castle, that's actually his legacy. Ludwig spent his fortune funding Richard Wagner's music and designing over-the-top palaces. But while he was living in his fantasy world, his kingdom was collapsing. De Palma was fascinated by that. I've always been interested in characters who create their own reality. And when you have a lot of money, you can do that. Before The Truman Show, before The Matrix, there was The Secret Cinema. Directed by Paul Bartel, this short film follows Jane, a woman who has no idea that every moment of her life is being filmed and screened at a local theater. Her struggles, her private moments, it's all turned into soap opera entertainment for the people around her. Even her psychiatrist is in on it. De Palma saw The Secret Cinema when it played as a double feature with his own film, Murder à la Mode. He liked it so much that years later, while sitting on a plane with Spielberg, he told him the entire story. Spielberg ended up using a version of it for Amazing Stories, his 1980s anthology series. And here's where it gets even more interesting. De Palma was actually attached to direct The Truman Show before Peter Weir took over. Considering how much The Secret Cinema influenced him, it makes sense.